Welcome, everybody. It's 1 o'clock on February 26th. We're officially starting our Ag Innovation Board meeting. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded as public record, and that participation in a recorded meeting will be deemed as consent to be recorded, including statements both written and oral. Public records, including this recording, can be requested at any time in accordance with the Vermont Public Records Act. So welcome, happy February. Let's start off with our introductions of those on the call. So we'll start with members, and let's start with members in the room. So I think, Anne, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, Anne Hazelrig, UVM Extension.
There.
Sarah Owen, State Toxicologist with the Health Department.
Let's see, on the call are members, Abby?
Abby Pajak, DEC, CAFO program.
Roy?
Roy Beckford and Anne Hazel Reagan with UVM Extension.
Thanks. Ryan?
Ryan Rebozo with the Vermont Center for Eco Studies.
And Wendy Sue?
Wendy Sue Harper, soil scientist.
Thanks, Wendy Sue. Okay, others that we have on the call. Brooke?
Hi, are we doing intros from the agency?
Yeah, so we just so everyone knows who is on the call, just a quick intro.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Yep.
It was a quick transition. This is Brooke Decker with the Agency of Agriculture listening in.
Thanks. Steve Cash?
Steve Cash, Agency of Agriculture, Water Quality Division.
All right, Dylan?
This is Dylan Gabbert with Bayer Crop Science.
Thanks. And so now I think that's everybody on the call. Oh, I do have a phone number ending in 4575. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, hey, Steve Schubart here. I'm on the board and we'll get in front of a computer screen in about 10 minutes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve. All right, in the room, we also will go around. Go ahead, Sam.
Pam Breyer, I'm the agrochemical toxicologist with the Agency of Ag. Stephanie Smith, Deputy Director of the Public Health and Agriculture Resource Management Division at the Agency of Agriculture.
Jill Goss, Seed Fertilizer Specialist at the Agency of Agriculture.
Zach Schakowsky, Agricultural Resource Management Specialist, also the Farm Division.
And I'm Morgan Griffiths, and I work in the Farm Division of the Agency of Ag. And so, our agenda we posted, so the main chunk of today is we're going over 3 key bills that are in front of legislature right now that are relevant to pesticide regulations. And so before we get to that, the quick update we have from the agency based from our recommendations that the AIB gave to the agency for best management practices for neonic treated article seeds is that the Secretary is considering issuing a set of BMPs. And so what's in the statute is that deadline is BMPs should be issued to the House and Senate Ag committees by March 1st. So the Secretary is considering issuing BMPs that would be consistent with the AIB recommendations that we made, but a final decision has not been made yet. So those BMPs will be sent to members as soon as the secretary kind of makes that final decision. And that should be pretty soon. Obviously, the first is on Friday. And that we will send the BMPs to members, and that you guys will have options to weigh in, because what the next steps for those BMPs would be to go through the rulemaking process. And so will be ample opportunity for discussion and more input on them. But so that's kind of the agency update as of right now, stemming from what we have been doing. So I think, and I know the action items we had were to talk about the survey, and so that's at the end of the agenda today. So I think we'll talk about that when that comes up. And then, so I think without further ado, we can just kind of start off with our first bill, which is relating to the use and prohibition of neonic pesticides and neonic treated article seeds. And so Zach is going to lead the charge on that.
Happy to do so. If I'm speaking too softly, just please don't hesitate to just let me know, and I'll do better. So, may or may not be aware of recent legislation that's been circling around the Vermont State House, and as of last year, and also into this year, the New York State House. In Vermont, this is House Bill 706. It's been in the House Committee on Agriculture, Forestry, and Food Resiliency. And then on the Senate side, or New York side, they passed their bill, the Birds and the Bees Act, this past January, or last January, I think. But New York has a kind of a quirky thing where the governor is able to, instead of like veto necessarily outright, they can send the bill back to the legislature and with revisions. So the New York bill was passed, but that has now been changed per the New York governor. So what I have here is kind of like a side-by-side of the current H706, the Vermont bill, and then the New York bill as it currently stands, I believe, I hope so, unless things have changed more recently. It's kind of my short form notes, because to do a side-by-side of these two bills is kind of odd, so I hopefully this is a little more digestible for the board and other members who are tuning in. So I guess just to take it away, so the House Bill 706 is broken into different sections. I didn't include sections 1 or 2. Sections 1 and 2 are findings and definitions respectively. But getting to the thick of it, section 3 starts with the prohibition on neonicotinoid treated seeds, and the prohibition relates to the sale, offering for sale, or use, distribution, or use of certain neonicotinoid treated article seeds, aka seeds that are treated or coated with a neonicotinoid pesticide. On the flip side is New York, and their prohibition is the sale, offering for sale, or use, or distribution of certain seeds treated with the active ingredients clothianidin, imidacloprid, and thiamethoxam, or any other neonicotinoid as determined by the department in regulation. And department refers to, with regards to New York, that's the Department of Environmental Conservation, I believe, who actually has, unlike Vermont, they have state delegated authority to regulate pesticides under FIFRA. On the flip side, in Vermont, the state lead agency, SLA, is the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. So just a quick comparative note, the Vermont bill does include use, whereas the New York one doesn't. It's not really sure how that's meant to play out in reality, but it gets a little tricky because under federal law, neonicotinoid treated article seeds are treated articles, and therefore they're exempt from most provisions of FIFRA. So saying use, regulating the use of them, is a little wonky, but regardless, the main differences to note are that the Vermont bill kind of intended to cover all neonicotinoid active ingredients, whereas the New York bill, it only covers those three: clothianidin, imidacloprid, and the other one, because I'm not going to struggle through saying that again. And then, but with the other caveat that the commissioner, I believe, of New York DEC has the option to regulate additional active ingredients through regulation. Both these kind of bans are supposed to become effective on January 1st, 2029. You'll see I have certain things highlighted on the left of the Vermont, and that's based on the latest draft of H706 that was issued this past Friday. So previously it was January 1st, 2027. It is now 2029 to be more in line with the New York bill and just generally give the farmers and the manufacturers a little more time to get things ready. And if anyone has a question, also just go ahead and fire away while I'm doing this, because it's a little boring.
One more question.
Yeah.
This might be a silly question. If you look at the records of neonicotinoid use in Vermont, what % of the use is accounted for by treated seeds versus, I guess, foliar spray? I guess, in other words,
Okay.
why are they doing a bill to only stop treated seeds?
I'll get to that. It doesn't.
Okay.
It covers other non-treated seeds as well. But
So like neonicotinoids would not be permitted for use in the state?
with certain caveats.
They specifically say one, but so to answer use for use, we don't have specific data on use of treated seeds because the usage reports that we receive are from commercial applicators, first of all, and then second of all, they're not considered pesticides, so they're not, they don't fall under our required reporting of, pesticides. So we do have, and I think it's on our team's channel, we did do some calculations based on assumptions of a range of how much neonic could be on a seed, and then assumption of an acreage of corn, for example, planted in the state, and then assuming that 99% of that corn was planted with those seeds. So we did, assumption after assumption, time to understand a pound, total pounds, and then also pounds per acre compared to those other commercial applicator usage that is reported to us. And so it is significant compared to commercial usage that is reported to us of assumed usage of neonic seeds.
Yeah, but you'll get to the point where it's outlined, because
Right.
the question I would get to is what would be the replacement pesticide?
Yeah, that's definitely been a hot discussion in committee of late. And just, I kind of glossed over it, but treated seeds are treated articles under FIFRA, and they are exempt in that, so you have to have a certified applicator license to apply the pesticide to the seed. But once that's done, regulation ends. So it's, it's transportation, it's planting, all of that is outside the scope of FIFRA, and I believe still under Vermont law. But anyways, moving on. So the other part of this is, what does the prohibition apply to? So the types of seeds that this prohibition in Vermont would apply to are soybeans, crop group 15, cereal grains, and I have a table. It's pretty much all cereal grains, and then 15 through 22 just further breaks those down into even more cereal grains. And then it's crop group 16, which is essentially the forage, fodder, and straw of everything that's in the cereal grains group. And then further down, it's crop group 16 through 22. So I guess I can go here. So this is crop group 15. This is straight out of, I believe, the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations. So you have, barley, buckwheat, corn, millet, pearl, millet, oats, popcorn, yada, 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 to pull it in the lane. And then, so this is the 15 through 22, which is amaranth, barley. It's very expansive. I'll just kind of leave it at that. Covers just about everything. And then, like I said, the forage, the crop group 16 is essentially anything that's all of that, what I just briefly showed you, that's used for forage, fodder, or straw. On the other side, New York, it's just corn, soybean, and wheat. They seem to have kept it rather simple. And that's that. Moving on, so both bills, there's a general prohibition, but there is an exemption order, is what it's called in Vermont, in the Vermont bill, but it's called a waiver in New York. So the exemption order in Vermont, so originally the bill was introduced as the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources was going to kind of head this. You're fine. But more recently, as of Friday, that's been flipped because the Agency of Agriculture is the state lead agency who regulates pesticides. So they recognize that, and so it's back to this. So the Secretary of Agriculture may, after consultation with A&R, issue a written exemption order to suspend certain provisions of the prohibition. In New York, the Commissioner of DEC, in consultation with Ag, may issue a waiver to allow for the use of such seeds for the production of agricultural commodities. The Vermont bill doesn't have that kind of caveat about production of agricultural commodities. I don't think it's a big deal, though, because I don't think you would be using the seeds for much else, unless I'm missing something. So what do you have to do to issue an exemption order? So back to Vermont. In Vermont, the Secretary of Agriculture must specify the types of neonicotinoid treated article seeds to which the exemption order applies, the date on which the exemption order takes effect, the exemption order's duration, the exemption order's geographic scope, and as of Friday, this may include specific farms, fields, or properties. I believe that is a way to narrow it down. So the way that it's written, I think it can be very large geographic scope. maybe like whole counties, maybe a whole state, or, you know, at the lowest level, specific farms, fields, or properties. Continuing on with New York, Vermont. We would have to, the AAFM would have to provide a detailed evaluation of the agricultural seed market, including a determination that either the purchase of seeds would cause agricultural producers undue financial hardship, or that there is an insufficient amount of commercially available seed not treated with neonicotinoid pesticides to supply agricultural producers. And then lastly, provide a detailed evaluation of the exemption order's anticipated effect on pollinator populations, bird populations, ecosystem health, and public health, including including whether the exemption order will cause undue harm to pollinator populations, bird populations, ecosystem health, and public health. Previously, it was a determination that the exemption order will not cause undue harm, and I think that was changed because concerns of whether or not that determination could ever be made, as it was originally written. On the flip side, in New York, the requirements for issuing a waiver are that the farm owner must complete an integrated pest management training, a pest risk assessment, and a pest risk assessment report must be completed, that any such seeds may only be planted on the farm property or properties identified in the pest risk assessment report, and that the farm owner must maintain current records of that report, and records of when the seeds are planted, both of which are subject to review. So these are pretty different with regards to the use or the waiver and treated seeds. Morgan, correct me if I'm wrong, but the New York one seems to align more with it's either Quebec or Ontario. Is that a good statement?
Yeah.
The IPM.
The IPM training aligns with Ontario, and then, and Ontario has to do a pest risk assessment too. I think Quebec is the one that like has to do the pest risk assessment, but by a certified agronomist that then has to almost like prescribe them, like, yes, based on this, you can use neonic treated seeds would be Quebec. So I guess more on Ontario, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So, yeah, little comparative note. The Vermont bill does not require IPM training, pest risk assessment. Seeds may only be planted on properties identified in the pest risk assessment, and the maintenance of records. That's not to say that, and I'll discuss this a little later on, that such requirements could be made as part of best management practices under rulemaking. On the flip side, in New York, they don't require a detailed evaluation of the seed market or a detailed evaluation of the anticipated effects on pollinators and whether undue harm to pollinators or public health would result. In addition, the Vermont bill allows other requirements that may be included in an exemption order. So the exemption order could also establish restrictions related to the use of the seeds to which the exemption order applies to minimize harm. So it's kind of just additional restrictions. I guess that would be like BMP's other restrictions related to the use of the neonicotinoid treated article seeds that the Secretary considers necessary. New York doesn't, it has no mention of additional requirements. Duration of the exemption order in Vermont, so 1 year. So an exemption order cannot be issued for the duration of longer than a year. As opposed to in New York, it is 2 years. Back to Vermont. So, and this is VAFM, my apologies, recent changes. VAFM must submit a copy, I believe it's VAFM, a copy of any exemption order issued to the Senate committees on natural resources and energy and agriculture, the House committees on environment and energy and agriculture, food and forestry, and the Agricultural Innovation Board. So any exemption order that would be issued would need to go to these committees and board. On the New York side, the DEC is required to report to the legislature annually on the number of waivers issued. So it's kind of quite a difference there in reporting. So as opposed to every exemption order, New York just is looking to get the number of orders issued. So rescission of an exemption order in Vermont, Secretary of Ag in consultation with ANR may rescind an exemption order at any time. Rescission effective no sooner than 30 days after its issuance and does not apply to neonicotinoid treated article seeds planted or sown before such rescission comes into effect. New York bill does not, I don't believe, touch on this. Again, or not again, but just for note, there's various other aspects of New York law I'm sure I'm missing, and because I just looked specifically at this bill, so they may cover this or other things that I'm not speaking to. Rulemaking, so in addition, and this is in New York, the Commissioner of DC is required to adopt appropriate rules prior to undertaking the waiver process. As for Vermont, I'll get to this more down the road, but the rules have to do with the BMPs that I believe you all have been discussing for a bit. So moving on, so this is section 4 of the Vermont bill, and this relates to neonicotinoid pesticides, not treated article seeds, and this is prohibited uses, and then I have similar on the New York side. So the prohibitions, the Vermont bill proposes to prohibit the following uses of neonicotinoid pesticides. The outdoor application of neonicotinoid pesticides to any crop during bloom, and they do give a definition of bloom. The outdoor application of neonicotinoid pesticides to soybeans or any crop in the cereal grains crop group, and that's the same crop groups that I mentioned above. The outdoor application of neonicotinoid pesticides to any crop between heading or tassel, emergence, and harvest. The outdoor application of neonicotinoid pesticides to crops in the leafy vegetables, brassica, bulb vegetables, herbs and spices, and stalk stem, and leaf petiole vegetables crop groups. And the crop groups are listed there. Harvested after bloom. The application of neonicotinoid pesticides to ornamental plants. And 6, the application of neonicotinoid pesticides to turf grass.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is to get to your question. So these are all the other prohibitions, and so the highlighted one
Was added on Friday.
Was added on Friday, and that's to get at, because one of the alternatives that they could have used for having the neonic on the seed was to spray it in furrow, like we heard, right? And so this would make that application also prohibited, is our understanding.
Without a waiver.
Without a waiver, yes, thank you.
Or exemption order, sorry. In New York, the bill would prohibit any person from applying or treating outdoor ornamental plants and turf except for the production of agricultural commodities or structural commercial applications within 1 foot of a building foundation perimeter to manage structural pests, provided that the application is not conducted on any blooming plant with a pesticide. So this is kind of like a phase-in approach. The active ingredients, imidacloprid, thiamethoxam, or acetamiprid. On or after 12/31/2026, and then the active ingredients, clothianidin or dinetafurane, effective 12/31/2024. You're not going to, so there's no phase-in on the Vermont side, and it's all neonicotinoid, all active ingredients. Yep.
And this is, Stephanie here, this is without an exemption order. None of these pesticides can be applied because dinetafurane or tefuran or however you say it, that is, I think, is a chemical that's used in the treatment for spotted lanternfly. We don't have spotted lanternfly in the state of Vermont, but it is an invasive pest in other parts of the country.
There's been some discussion, is there anything in the new amendment? Because I know there's been some discussion in committee. They've talked about invasive
Because it's, I think it's a systemic.
use, but it looks like it hasn't been written in yet then.
I don't think so. I believe I got everything from. But Steve, is that you chiming in?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi.
And I've been
That's a good
on
question.
this whole time. I'm just getting in front of my computer now. Thanks.
Okay, awesome, thanks, Steve.
Without an
Yeah.
exemption order, so I just wanted, I was processing it out loud, I guess, with all of you.
Well,
Right.
it could be part of the, is there, this, in the exemption order, you're gonna get to it, is emergency, right?
Yes,
Anyway, so
correct.
that could be
Yeah.
considered as an emergency, but yeah, yeah.
So yeah, the Vermont bill would prohibit the application treatment of any neonicotinoid pesticide, much larger group of plants, with the exception of, you know, when, where an application may be made, and also pending the class/group of plant or crop. The prohibition would become effective as proposed July 1st, 2025. And the New York bill, as described, is quite different and only applies to turf. So here's the exemption order. So similar to the first part that I discussed with you, and the neonicotinoid treated seeds, there is an exemption order. So there's the, you know, general prohibition, but an exemption order can exempt these provisions. So VAFM may, after consultation with ANR, issue a written exemption order to suspend certain provisions of the prohibition. Similarly, New York has exemption order on their side as well. So the requirements for issuing an exemption order under H706 Vermont would need to specify the neonicotinoid pesticide uses and crops to which the exemption order applies, the date on which the exemption order takes effect, the exemption order's duration, and the exemption order's geographic scope. So that's the same as the treated seeds. A detailed evaluation determining that an agricultural emergency or an environmental emergency exists, and I'll provide that definition below. Detailed evaluation of reasonable responses available to address the agricultural emergency or the environmental emergency, including a determination that the use of neonicotinoid pesticides to which the exemption order applies would be effective in addressing the emergency, and determination that there is no other less harmful pesticide or pest management practice that would be effective in addressing the emergency. And then lastly, I believe it's the same language for the seeds, provide a detailed evaluation of the exemption order's anticipated effects on pollinator populations, bird populations, ecosystem health, public health, including whether the exemption order will cause undue harm to pollinator populations, bird populations, so on. And so the bill defines agricultural emergency as an occurrence of any pest that presents an imminent risk of significant harm, injury, or loss to agricultural crops. And the definition of environmental emergency is an occurrence of any pest that presents a significant risk of harm or injury to the environment, or significant harm, injury, or loss to agricultural crops, including any exotic or foreign pests that may need preventative quarantine measures to avert or prevent that risk as determined by the Secretary of Agriculture. So that would be a spotted lanternfly, infestation would be grounds for issuing an exemption, part of the grounds for issuing an exemption order. On the other side, New York, they can only issue an exemption order for if a valid environmental emergency exists. Essentially, it's the same. The pesticide would be effective. No other less harmful pesticide or pest management practices would be effective. And then that the exemption order must include the basis of the determination and specify approved time period, geographic scope, and purpose of the permitted use of such pesticide.
Question though.
Yep.
But in New York, they're only prohibiting the use on soy, corn, and wheat. So the exemption order, no, did I miss that?
Outdoor ornamental plants and
Oh,
turf,
sorry. Okay, never mind.
except for the production of agricultural commodities.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, just comparatively, they're pretty similar, except for Vermont bill has that detailed evaluation on the anticipated effects of pollinators and whether the waiver will cause undue harm. Similar to the treated seeds part above, an exemption order can establish additional restrictions related to the neonicotinoid pesticides to which the exemption order applies to minimize harm, and then other restrictions that the Secretary deems necessary. In New York, they have that applicators using a pesticide containing the active ingredients imidacloprid, diamethoxin, acetamiprid, clethodim, or dinotefuran must take a department-approved neonicotinoid course annually and maintain a record of this course for 3 years. So this does not exist in the Vermont bill. Both waivers can only be a year, both New York and Vermont. Reporting, same as above, submit a copy of any exemption order to the respective committees as well as the AIB. No reporting in New York. Rescission, same as above. An exemption order may be rescinded. Research, so the New York bill goes into a little more details about research, and it requires their DC and Ag agency or department, I can't remember, in consultation with New York State's land grant university, I would imagine that would be Cornell, shall conduct a study to identify practical and feasible alternatives to the use of pesticides containing those active ingredients. And then the results of the study need to be submitted to the governor, as well as other people at a certain time. and be posted on their website. So the bill doesn't really have anything on, this research, but this board exists. This board is doing a lot of this research and looking into these things, and is continuing to do that work. Okay, so this is not short form, and so what I've done here, this is regarding kind of rulemaking and other things. So on the left, we have the current law, and on the right is the proposed amendments to the current law. And this is, so left, current law, Vermont, right, Vermont law as proposed under H706. So under, I believe it's 6 CSA Chapter 81, Section 918, essentially this is the section that says that the Secretary of Agriculture shall register any economic poison, and various other details about how that's done. But the important part here is that it says that the Secretary shall register as a restricted use pesticide any neonicotinoid pesticide labeled as approved for outdoor use, and so on. And then down below, provided that the Secretary shall not register the following products as restricted use pesticides unless classified under federal law as restricted use products. And then you have treated article seed. The bill is proposing to remove this, and there is language here actually that says unless otherwise prohibited. That's new. You have to register any neonicotinoid pesticide as restricted use, and then they remove the treated article seed as something that we wouldn't register. So I assumption that maybe they want us to register treated article seeds, but I'm not going to get into that. Moving on. So we have treated articles, powers of the Secretary of Best Management Practices. So this is under the current law, we have what you all have been, one of the tasks is to adopt by rule best management practices for the use in the state of neonicotinoid treated article seeds. And then there's A through G, which I believe you all are aware of. So what the bill does, it's similar but different. So it's same language for the beginning part, but then they remove, or they take, yes, how do you say this? This part is now a 2. So these, the establishment of threshold levels, that's lower. And they've inserted above this, so shall adopt by rule BMPs for the use in the state of neonicotinoid treated article seeds when used prior to the proposed ban of January 1st, 2029. So that would be, between when this bill, hypothetically passes and the time of the ban in 2029, the Secretary of Agriculture, in consultation with the board, would need to go through rulemaking to have rules for, neonicotinoid treated article seeds. B, neonicotinoid treated article seeds when the Secretary issues a written exemption order. authorizing use for the treated article seeds. So that's post-ban, bans in place, it's 2029. A exemption order is sent out, and, you know, we would have, I guess, separate BMPs hypothetically that address specifically to the exemption order. I'm not entirely sure how that is supposed to work out, but, you know, we're not there. C, neonicotinoid pesticides, when the secretary issues a written exemption order, so this is not the seeds, but just pesticides generally. Neonicotinoid pesticides, so that would be post 2025 when that ban takes place. So if an exemption order is made, we would need to have BMPs on the use of neonicotinoid pesticides as they apply to that exemption order, I guess. D, insecticide treated article seeds other than a neonicotinoid treated article seed. So I believe the idea there is to have BMPs for, you know, what are the other neonicotinoid or other insecticides that are going on seeds. So we know of the diamides, but this is broad enough that it could be just other insecticides other than diamides or neonicotinoids. And then they get, you know, in developing the rules with the AIB, the secretary shall address, and this is where it goes back to normal somewhat. So we have the establishment of threshold levels of pest pressure required prior to the use of the neonicotinoid treated article seeds, insecticide treated article seeds, or neonicotinoid pesticides. Essentially, this is just really expanding the breadth of these criteria to include more than just neonicotinoid treated article seeds, but to also include insecticide treated article seeds. Availability of non-treated article seeds that are not neonicotinoid treated article seeds or that are not insecticide treated article seeds, economic impact from crop loss as compared to crop yield when neonicotinoid treated article seeds, insecticide treated article seeds or neonicotinoid pesticides are used, relative toxicities of neonicotinoid treated article seeds, so on. I think you probably get the point. They just kind of add insecticide treated article seeds, neonicotinoid pesticides to all these criteria. And then this is the same, it's just changed to 3 because they added that too. Continuing to,
So, hold on,
yeah.
just go back up. So they did add, so we're all used to seeing those A through G,
Right.
but we're not used to seeing that H and I. Can you go down a little? So those are
Right,
kind
sorry,
of
yep.
like two
Thank you.
new-ish required topics.
Yeah.
So like, we've all been discussing this in terms of those 7 required topics, like how we like structured our last year and a half, right? So, this is the first time I just saw it right now. So,
Yeah, thank
yeah,
you.
so that's a big difference for us to think about, that those are 2 new ones.
Right.
You just want to read it? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Sorry,
think at the
my-
same time, but.
The effects of insecticide treated article seeds on wild pollinators, managed pollinators, and other beneficial insects. And lastly, the effects of insecticide treated article seeds on soil health, farms that do not use insecticide treated article seeds, including organic farms. So those are new. Otherwise, they're largely the same, but added insecticide treated article seeds or neonicotinoid pesticides. And then kind of like timing wise, on or before March 1st, the Secretary of Agriculture shall submit to the Ag Committees, House and Senate, a copy of the proposed rules required to be adopted under this and that. If we go back up. that is neonicotinoid treated article seeds when used prior to January 1st. So that would be, yeah, BMPs for neonicotinoid treated article seeds prior to ban. And then additional, more work on or before July 1st, 2025. Adopt rules establishing best management practices for use in the state of treated article seeds containing or coated with anthranilic diamides. Okay, well, that I believe wraps it up.
Why is that last section in there? Do those kill bees too?
I think they're trying to take into effect unintended consequences.
Right. So yeah, if the ban goes into place on neonicotinoid treated seeds, you know, then is everyone going to start using diamides? And the concern, you know, what all that entails, the idea here is that the Secretary or the Agency of Agriculture will have BMPs that address these other insecticides, as opposed to, like, you know, singling out neonicotinoid insecticides only. But I think it's also broad enough that it leaves open the door for BMPs for other insecticides across the board. It just in this specific act, and this is like this language down here, this is like would be session law, meaning that it wouldn't be in statute. It would just be in the act if it were passed. So you know, later down the road, they could, you know, pass another bill that said, hey, you have to come up with BMPs that address this other insecticide that's going on seeds that's not neonicotinoids or diamides, and they would have authority to do that because this is all insecticides. All right, so hopefully everyone's not asleep. I'm done. Unless you have questions.
Yeah, I think we'll take questions or I think that one of the main reasons why we're going through these bills today are because it is in our responsibility list to provide comment, advice, recommendations based on current legislature that's been introduced. So I think this is a time for members to voice opinions that can then be given to Secretary of Ag, Agency of Ag, relevant to these. So if anyone has a question and or just a comment, opinion, concern in support, anything of that this now's the time to voice it. Go ahead, Ann.
I didn't remember a date being put in there, the 2029. Has that always been in there? In the room?
In the bill?
Yeah.
So it used to be 2027. The original bill, H706, as proposed, the ban, I believe, would have gone into effect in 2027. They
Okay.
changed that Friday.
Okay, to 29.
Right.
Okay, all right. Which is kind of good because that mirrors
Right.
New York.
Right. Right. That was.
Because I feel like
the
once
idea.
New York goes, then Vermont will be more likely to follow.
And here's the bill. But
I believe you.
thanks.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Zach. Oh, go ahead.
Roy.
Yeah, I was curious, for the New York, bill, so to speak, who was responsible for the pest risk assessment report? Is it IPM? Who? I just was just curious about that.
That's a good question. It seems like it's on the farmer.
I think it also will fall into, so the New York DEC, which is the, like the pesticide regulation agency of New York, has to adopt rules
Right.
to further explain the waiver process.
Yes.
So I think that we have to wait to see those rules to understand what I think it will be up to their determination to explain in the rules how that pest risk assessment works and the IPM training requirement. So I think it will be explained further once they make those rules.
Yeah, the New York bill is generally a lot less verbose, and that, as Morgan's saying, I think it's with the understanding that a lot of the details, nuances are going to be explained further by regulation.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions or concerns or words of support for the bill that members want to share? Cool. Thank you, Zach.
Yep.
And that, and with the quick turnaround from Friday's amendment, that was great. Okay, so we're really shifting gears, and we're going to go to Pam Breyer to talk about another bill that is not neonics related. Oh, but I'll let her kind of set it up.
Just like when Zach was talking, if I'm too quiet, please let me know. I don't know which microphone it is, but let me know. I also have lots of wordy slides. My apologies there. Oh, it's so slow. Hold on while I get my slides up. Okay. At first, I wasn't going to have any slides, but I thought this would be a little bit better than staring at us in the room. So, S-197, as proposed, is in, it's not in the Ag committees, it's actually in the Health and Welfare Committee. And I'm not going to speak to all of those parts until I get into the amendment discussion. But what Senate Health and Welfare did is they asked Senate Ag to review sections 6 and 7. And so what you're looking at here is the language from section 7 as proposed. And what this bill does is it puts a prohibition on pesticides if it contains PFAS. But the initial bill as proposed actually singles out these 6 PFAS that you have here, A through F, and says that they're not allowed in any pesticide product. And they use the language, you can see it at the very bottom, active. These 6 ingredients can't be in a pesticide if it's the active, inactive, or inert ingredient. I think that's all I have to say about that one. I'll go through the rest of the bill first before commenting. The bill also went on to describe, it was a bit confusing, but essentially a focus on making sure that pesticides do not get stored in fluorinated containers. If the pesticide is stored in a fluorinated container, that it would have to be tested. And if it tested above 20 parts per trillion, then it would be, sale would be prohibited. And so, no, I'm not gonna comment. I'm just gonna keep talking about what is written. Okay, so section C then starts the description of other, the annual submission of the confidential statement of formula and an affidavit. And the affidavit would attest to whether or not that pesticide product had ever been stored in a fluorinated container. It went into some details of what the registrant would have to submit to the state. And I'm actually not going to go into those details, just to say that there were some specific pieces of information that the bill requested, and that all of this would take place starting January 1st of the upcoming year. Now I'm going to go back. And when I read this portion, I saw it as very redundant to federal law. PFAS are not allowed as the active ingredient or the inactive ingredient of any pesticide product. So this portion was redundant. The fluorinated container piece is interesting. There's developing evidence that there is definitely the possibility that PFAS can be created kind of de novo in packages that are in plastic containers that are fluorinated. And this is a really big topic nationally within the state lead agencies. There's not a lot of, there's not a lot of ways to test whether or not you have PFAS coming into your products that are reliable. And so there, to date, have been a lot of conflicting reports of, yes, we find PFAS, no, we don't find PFAS. And so this is interesting, but likely to be fraught with enforcement difficulty from an agency perspective of trying to test every product. There simply isn't the testing capacity to get all 12,000 products tested on an annual, as needed basis. Currently for Section C, the agency already has the ability to collect the confidential statement of formula anytime we need it. And when you talk about doing it at this scale, what does it look like for the agency? Because each one of these documents is a confidential document that must be kept secure. And so you would have to create a portal by which we could receive 12,000 of those and link them up to the products that they're registered to. So if we don't have a use for the data, in terms of we're not going through every single ingredient on every single product, then the utility of collecting those doesn't become that useful. The same thing happens with the affidavit for each product that's registered for each year. The person registering the pesticide would be required to essentially get the legal team at each one of these registrants to sign off that the product had never been stored, transferred, or contained in a fluorinated container. And prior to coming here, I was in Maine when a very similar bill was passed in Maine. And the combination of the affidavit about container fluorination and the CSF caused major problems with the state of Maine. And we actually have I don't want to badmouth Vermont, but we have a different registration system. We already had an electronic portal that was able to accept these kind of documents that were requested, and it still took us an extra $100,000, and we had 1.5 FTE, right, working on this, and it was a major issue. And to date, Maine has still not been able to access any of the information that they've collected for litigation concerns. So the collection of this data would be a huge effort, and when you don't know what you want to do with the data, it's not as useful. The details of the attestation are really, I don't have any comment on them. And it's a really quick turnaround time in order to stand up a process for the intake of that much data, that much confidential data. To be able to be ready to do that on the next registration year would be difficult. Did I say everything
I think so.
that I was thinking? That was the original bill.
Yes, I think so.
Very recently, an amendment has been proposed. And the amendment changes everything. So you can see the yellow highlighting, that shows the new language. And I said at the beginning, I skipped over the first 5 sections of the bill. This kind of replaces a good portion of the first part of that bill. And it essentially creates a statewide prohibition on any product that contains PFAS that has been intentionally added to the product. And this actually affects pesticides much more broadly than the initial bill did. So, and it's because the definition of a PFAS. And I've cut this from an earlier portion in the amendment, but the language that they use here to define a PFAS is a class of fluorinated organic chemicals containing at least one fully fluorinated carbon atom. Now, I was in Maine when this definition came into our regulations also, and this definition is a very, very broad definition. There's a good reason that you want to use a broad definition. Essentially, we are in a mess with PFAS, and part of the reason we're in that mess is when PFOA and PFOS were found to be bad actors. They were forced off of the market 20 years ago, and industry pivoted to very similar chemicals. It's the concept of the regrettable substitution. And so a definition this broad is really intended to make sure that we never again allow these chemicals into the marketplace. This particular definition, the one fully fluorinated carbon definition, is very broad, and it pulls in many, many things that you would not consider to be PFAS. The other day in one of the committees, somebody was asking for the origin story of the class of the word PFAS, and I think we could actually have a good 20-minute discussion on just this problem. But I think part of the problem with PFAS regulation in the United States today has been that nobody wants to say these long chemical names, and that what we've been calling them has been changing. So 16 years ago, I think when I got married, I got new pots and pans because I got rid of all my Teflon pots and pans. But back then we weren't calling it PFAS. It was C8 was the big chemical name that you associated it with. And over time, we've just been changing the name of what we call this group of chemicals. And I still hate this particular definition. I think I've been pretty clear in memos for the last couple of years about that. But this is why I think this definition is really difficult. On the left, you have PFOA. This is a PFAS that has been prohibited for use and manufacture in the United States for 20 years. And it's one of these just traditional PFAS of concern. On the right, you have bifenthrin. It's a currently registered insecticide that's widely used in tick and mosquito products. And under this one fully fluorinated carbon definition, both of them would be considered to be PFAS. I have some other pictures. Sarah, Dr. Owen, and I have been participating with DEC in a working group trying to come to a consensus on what kind of definition of PFAS we can move forward with that doesn't further confuse the topic. That's a good way to put that. The quote that you have up here is the definition that Dr. Owen provided in testimony last week or the week before. And it takes the one fully fluorinated carbon definition that I just showed you from the original language, and then adds on to it that it would be found in what I refer to as TSCA 8A7, and it's referred to in the CFR quote here. And before I go any further, recently EPA issued an order to all manufacturers to go back in time for the last 10 years and to inventory every time they have used one of these TSCA 8A7 chemicals. So DEC is interested in aligning the state's collection of data with this definition so that we can then use all the federal information that we get. So in a year or two, where EPA will be collecting data from use patterns all across the United States for the past 10 years, and we'll have a much better idea of where PFAS have been used. Because one of the things, I think if you've been in a conversation about PFAS, is people always pull out their favorite place. I found PFAS recently, like dental sutures is one that I thought was really interesting. Dental floss. I tried to find plumber's putty that wasn't PFAS, and you almost can't do that. So that's what EPA is grappling with right now, is trying to identify all the places in commerce where we have PFAS. So by reference, the working definition that we have here uses the TSCA 8A7 definition. And then it allows for exemption of chemicals that are already heavily regulated, things like medicine, veterinary medicines, and pesticides, so long as those items are not persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic. And of course, there would have to be the ability to add chemicals to that list. So at the bottom of the screen, you can see the definition. It's a very complicated definition. I like to refer to it either as a 2-carbon definition or the TSCA definition, or sometimes the EPA working definition, because for a while in pesticides, that's what they were referring it to. This table shows you, so the one fully fluorinated carbon definition is the table in the top, and it has a really broad reach. Where it says Maine and Minnesota, those 2 lines, if you used a one fully fluorinated carbon definition, you would classify somewhere between 56 and 90 pesticide active ingredients as PFAS. Down at the bottom, it's not in a table, and I apologize, it's a pretty ugly slide. It says one fully fluorinated carbon would be, in the state of Vermont, 42 active ingredients, or about 1,600 different veterinary products. So that one fully fluorinated carbon definition pulls in a bunch of things that you just wouldn't imagine to be PFAS. There are some human medicines as well, not very many of them. Then at the very top of that table, where it says TSCA on the side, this is the working definition. That definition only pulls in about 4 pesticides, active ingredients, and none of the veterinary medicine products. So the TSCA 8A7 is a smaller, it pulls in fewer chemicals, but by numbers, it's not a huge difference. So the TSCA definition still has over 11,000 chemicals in its list. Oh, goodness. Sarah, what did I miss?
The language you showed is probably going to change on consumer products, so.
I guess that's a good point, that we have the initial bill as submitted, an amendment, and likely amendments to the amendment.
The language from the bill or the language of the definition? No, the language of the bill. You're saying it's likely to change?
Probably. I think right now, the proposal to ban PFAS in all consumer products is very likely to change.
Okay.
And I think the definition is likely to change also.
I hope so.
Yeah, I don't know what else to throw at the board.
I think we can ask the board if anyone has any question or opinion
It's
about it.
complicated.
Complicated. Mhm.
And scary how widespread it is.
There's an interesting comment in the chat. I don't know if Margaret wants to talk about that for a second.
Sure, I don't mind
Yeah,
saying something.
Okay, Marguerite, I can also, I know that you've been in the chat and I can leave it for, we do have dedicated time at the end of the agenda for public comment. And so if you, maybe let's save it for the public comment period and then we can capture it in the minutes and it will be in the transcript because it'll be in the chat as well.
Let me say this though. What if is there anybody is there any member that have any sense of what the veterinary the field of veterinary medicine might or these folks here would respond or react to this?
Yes, I've been talking to the state vet and they're very concerned. We went through the list of all FDA approved vet medicines that would be for use here in Vermont. There were those 42 active ingredients, but it was when the vet started going through that list for chemicals that they use that they did become quite concerned. So for instance, the anesthetic gas that you use for every pet surgery, like dog and cat, is considered PFAS under the one fully fluorinated carbon definition. I can't remember some of the other examples. That one was just very notable because it's very commonly used.
For the isoflurane.
Yeah.
And one of the more financially accessible for people with limited funds.
Yeah. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Do any other members have anything they would like to share relevant to this bill? Yeah, it can be in regards to so basically the only time that there's this potential significant impact to pesticides is if this broader language that might change, but is right now in the amendment pulls in. But as introduced, the pesticide language, I'm just making sure I understand this, as introduced, the pesticide language wouldn't have affected many pesticides, if any at all. And then now, because they're pulling in all products, that's when pesticides get pulled into the picture. So we'll have to see then how that changes. And so we'll maybe just, maybe we'll have you back and whatever, to understand how on a broader, I mean, yes, so I think veterinary also impacts agriculture as well, in addition to pesticides. I think both of those veins we can continue to keep our eye on.
Yeah, there's no doubt that PFAS don't belong in pesticides. Like when you think about the traditional PFAS, and there are none that are allowed for use. As soon as the pesticide company becomes aware that there is a PFAS in the product because of contamination, they're required to notify EPA within 30 days that contamination occurred. And EPA has been following up rapidly with companies when known cases of contamination have occurred. It's a violation of FIFRA to have PFAS in your product.
Okay. So before last chance, we're going to switch to the last bill that's been introduced. Okay, so Dave, you're up. Do you have something to share, or are you just going to talk?
I'm just going to talk.
Okay, that's fine. That's great. All right, Dave, and you want to just introduce yourself too?
Yeah.
We're here for you.
Yeah, hi, everybody. For the record, Dave Huber, Deputy Director of the Farm Division. Nice to see everybody in person and on the screen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about F-272, which is a bill that was introduced with the goal of regulating second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides. I'm just going to say SGARs from here on out for the acronym for that. For the purpose of this bill is going to propose to require that the Secretary of the Agency of Agriculture register second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides, SGARs, as restricted use pesticides that may only be used by certified pesticide applicators. And it's a pretty short bill. The short of it right now is that this bill is being contemplated as being assumed and subsumed by general housekeeping bill that the agency is working on with the committee. And so this bill may or may not be around in its independent form much longer. Just wanted to give you a heads up on that. But what this does is it does make amendments to 6 BSA section 911. And what it's doing there is it's including a definition of second generation anticoagulants, SGARs. And what they're saying that means is that any rodenticide containing any one of the following active ingredients: prodipicum, promanolone, difenicum, or difethiolone. And so those are the 4 SGARs. There are a lot of rodenticides out there. There are FGARs, those are the first generation anticoagulants. And I can get into what those are, as well as the 2008 EPA guidance on rodenticides. But before I do, just wanted to touch upon the rest of the bill. It is also looking to make these SGARs restricted use pesticides, RUPs, in the state of Vermont. And it is also looking to have a couple of studies done, as well as potential rulemaking on rodenticides. The studies are being done at the federal level right now by the EPA, and the EPA is supposedly going to come to an answer and a conclusion about SGARs coming up here in the fall. And so the agency is not exactly certain that this is necessary to go through these reports or the rulemaking, but testimony has focused on what SGARs are, the different classification of pesticides, A, B, and C in the state, as well as the 2008 EPA guidance for the reclassification of rodenticides. Does anybody have any questions about the 10,000-foot view before I jump into, if warranted, a 1-inch view?
I would love to hear the 1-inch view of the study. I don't know, like what you're saying, like there are some in there, so maybe it's like what's been proposed.
Yeah, so this is, so right now there's a bunch of potential mitigations in a draft rodenticide study that the EPA is looking at. And the EPA is going to be looking at these potential mitigations. And they should be coming up with an answer as to what they're going to do, whether or not they're going to establish this or not, but it does look like they are going to be moving on these mitigations. Post-application follow-up to dispose of spilled or kicked out bait, use of bait stations that exclude listed species by size or behavior, restriction of consumer products to non-refillable bait stations. The fourth one, which is the most germane to this bill, classification of rodenticides as restricted use pesticides for FGARs and SGARs. So they're going to be looking at that at the federal level, which would, in essence, make this bill, not necessary. They're also going to be looking at the placement of bait stations within 5 feet of structures, prohibition of broadcast and in-burrow uses in areas where at times of the year when listed animals have access to the treated area. Statements saying do not apply directly to water, which I think we can all agree is something that should be on the rodenticide. An establishment of the endangered species bulletins to implement specific mitigations needed in limited geographical areas or at times of year to protect particular species. This all goes into play with the ESA risk mitigation that the EPA has been working on for the past couple of years and is now ramping up very quickly. I believe Steve Dwinell has probably talked to this group repeatedly about the ESA and what's going on at the federal level with the ESA. Post-application follow-up to report dead or dying animals. Those would be reported to the EPA's pesticide incident reporting website as soon as possible. I have a link for that as well. And then lastly, post-application follow-up, which would include carcass search, collection, and disposal statements. So that's what the EPA is mulling over, and it looks like they're going to be moving on those roughly the same time that this bill would go into effect. And as we know, you have to be in the states as stricter than the federal government when it comes to this sort of regulation. And so right now, this would be stricter. But then if the EPA does move on this with their own regulations, then it would just be as strict. What the agency is understanding the committee might want to do is potentially get rid of the report rulemaking and have this so that all SCARs are going to be restricted use pesticides. Currently in Vermont, there are 68 products that are registered to contain SCARs, and 56 of these are classed as state restricted use, Class A. 12 are classed as Class B, controlled sale, and that's because they have the agricultural exemption applied to those products. And that's based, again, on the 2008 EPA restrictions on rodenticide guidance. So SCARs classed as Class B, they can be used in agricultural buildings. They have to be sold in minimum 8 pounds for agricultural use, and they have to contain a statement that says, do not use this product in homes or other human residences. And you're not going to find these products over at stores such as Home Depot or Lowe's, but you will find these over at farm stores like Agway or Tractor Supply, anything that's catering to the agricultural community. You're probably going to be finding these SCARs that are Class B being sold. And again, that's because of the agricultural exemption. So just to cut to the chase, what the bill would be doing is making so that the ag exemption has gone away and that all SCARs are then classified as Class A restricted use in the state. Now, they can still be used by the pest management professional industry to make applications, but then you have somebody who is certified to use Class A products making that application. You know, the Agency of Agriculture has been responding to concerns about secondary poisoning and non-targets. We've put together education campaign for consumers to use tamper-resistant bait stations, and probably can't see it too well. I can't see it too well on the screen, but I've shared this with AIB several months ago, I think over the last summer, and essentially what this is it's an alert for retailers who are selling rodenticide that if they can, because it's not mandated, but we've had really great cooperation with these stores, if they are selling rodenticide, then we would appreciate it if they would put this plastic poster up that is water resistant, so it can get splashed on. And what it does is it says that it's illegal to use these baits outdoors without a bait station. So it further puts the parameters and the legal guidance on how to properly and adequately use and legally use rodenticides in the state. There's also a QR code that if you scan it, it'll take you right to the Agency of Agriculture's website, where there's a embedded YouTube video showing the appropriate ways to use a bait station with the use of rodenticides. So we have that poster and a video. We've also provided education for pest control operators regarding the proper use of rodenticides. We've had 2 rodenticide meetings. One we held jointly with New Hampshire, and we've had very good attendance at these rodenticide meetings. The aim for these meetings was to get the pest management professionals involved so that they understand that while they may have a target on their backs, right, because they're using these products, potentially the misuse is being done by folks who are just purchasing this and using it outside of their training, because all pest management professionals who are utilizing rodenticide should have gone through the licensure that is provided by the Agency of Agriculture. And then we've also got our standard investigation and enforcement actions for rodenticide misuse that goes through our standard investigatory administrative process and our administrative enforcement process to make sure that compliance is met. And I just want to provide a little bit of background to everybody on FGARs and SGARs, just so everyone is aware of what these products are besides the names of the chemicals. First generation anticoagulants, FGARs, they include anticoagulants that were developed as rodenticides prior to 1970. And these compounds are much more toxic when feeding occurs on several successive days rather than on one day only. So chlorphacinone, diphacinone, and warfarin, those were first generation anticoagulants, and they are currently registered to control rats and mice in the United States. SGARs, on the other hand, were developed in the 1970s, and they were used to control rodents that are resistant to FGARs. So SGARs also are more likely than FGARs to kill after one night's feeding, and these compounds kill over a similar course of time, but they tend to remain in the animal tissues longer than do the first generation anticoagulants. And these properties mean that second generation products do pose greater risk to non-target species that might feed on bait only once, or that might feed upon animals that have eaten the bait. But due to these risks, the SGARs, they're no longer registered for use in products geared toward consumers and are registered only for the commercial pest control industry and structural pest control markets. SGARs are registered in the U.S., and they do include, as I said earlier, brodifacoum, medeolone, difenicum, and difethalone. Now, there's other rodenticides that are also in use that are neither FGAR nor SGAR, and those are like cholecalciferol and zinc phosphide, bromethylene also. But while these are not anticoagulants, they're toxic in their own way, and these are products that are mainly used by some of our federal government partners. They just prefer to use those as opposed to SGARs or FGARs.
Does anybody have any questions or thoughts to share? Members, I was thinking, Steve Schubart, you're our only producer on the call, member right now, and I was just wondering about those agriculturally exempt products. Do you ever use any type of rodenticide product in your operation?
I'm probably not a good producer to comment on that. We would not use any of those poisons on our soils. But yeah, I'm happy to offer more thoughts there, but I think they're off topic.
Well, that's fine. Thank you for sharing. I just, yeah, basically, so it's only those 12 products that are kind of in question of being classified differently, so have different accessibility.
Right. So what Maureen's getting at is, you know, Steve, if this goes through, that ag exemption would be gone for you, but you'd be able to hire a PMP, a pest management professional, to do that work, which gives some people peace of mind. Other people see dollar signs and say, I could do it for cheaper myself, but therein lies a fundamental question and potential problem. By doing it yourself, are you, without the licensure, are you potentially going to run afoul of compliance issues?
I can only, yeah. Looks like someone else was gonna make a comment.
Oh, it's okay, but Steve, you can finish your thought first. That's fine.
Oh, we don't use rodenticide. We don't have any issues with that. I think there are issues with regulating things that farmers can and can't do on their land, but I think we've all seen that farmers know how to get around that stuff with our own ingenuity. So I don't know, it kind of sounds like the right to repair question to me a little bit. But I don't, you know, I'm not a huge fan of poisons, so probably not a good person to ask about it.
Okay, thanks for sharing, Steve. Stephanie?
Yeah, does it take, like the traps that are pre-baited that are current, I think, are those
No,
currently available to
they are.
residential? And will those remain accessible to residential users?
Those will, because, so those are, and I can go into the 2008 guidance as well, because that does tackle Stephanie's question. So in Vermont, we have 3 classes of pesticides, A, B, and C. And Stephanie is referring to ready-to-use bait stations. These are RTUs. For the most part, this is bromomethylene, chlorphathinone, and diphathinone. So we're talking FGARs in those products. And those are, like I said, they are ready to use. In packaging, it's a pre-baited station. Now, they can be sold with a refillable up to 1 pound of bait that can be in that same packaging. And that allows the user to get the RTU product they're ready to use and then refill it one time. And that can be included with the bait station in the retail package. Those are Class C. Those would be untouched by this bill, because this bill is focusing on FGARs, and the RTUs are first generation FGARs. So this would be affecting those 12 products that have the ag exemption and are currently Class B, but if they didn't have the ag exemption, they would be Class A anyway. So, you know, all this does is, in essence, get rid of the ag exemption for Class B FGARs, and there's only 12 of them. And the agency is prepared to you know, bump these up to a Class A. It's just requiring that we make the change on our end, and then they would go through the routine administrative investigatory inspection processes that we already have in place if there was found to be a compliance issue. And then again, that would lead to the administrative enforcement process, which we already have in place, and we wouldn't be bogged down or burdened by an additional 12 products. For the Class B restricted sales, I'm going to start reading off a bunch of products here, and just know that these products must contain at least 4 pounds of bait. They can be larger quantity. They can be block, pellet, or paste, and they are not RTU in a bait station. But the label directs use in a bait station if outdoors. So these products are bromethylene, chlorphathinone, diphathinone, chlorcalciferol, and zinc phosphide. So for those products, they're Class B. Again, it has to be at least 4 pounds of bait that is being sold. Now, products labeled for use around agricultural buildings is where we get into the ag exemption for Class B, and this is those 12 products. They are sold in a minimum of 8 pounds for agricultural use, and again, they have to contain a statement, do not use this product in homes or other human residences. So this is strictly for ag use. These are prodificum, bromadiolone, difenicum, and dipenthiolone. So those are the FGARs that normally would be Class A, state restricted, federally restricted, but they're Class B due to the ag exemption. If you see any of those products, those 4 products that I just read off, prodificum, bromadiolone, difenicum, and dipenthiolone, if you see them being sold in a container size of 16 or more pounds, and it has a label on there that says for professional use, then you can rest assured that it's already classified as a Class A product in the state. And these are all based on the rodenticide reclassification guidelines from May 28, 2008 from the EPA.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions, comments, concerns that the members want to share? Great. Before we move to the next topic, I know that at the beginning of the meeting, I forgot to ask about the January minutes. I didn't hear about any edits to those minutes, but were members accept those minutes as they were provided to you? I'm seeing none.
Pretty sure I was absent.
Okay, I got an abstain. Okay. Thanks. So our final topic before we allow for public comment, which I appreciate everyone joined today for that, so we should have plenty of time for that. But our last topic is regarding our survey. So we talked a little bit about it last month. We talked about winter being a good time. Winter is slipping away from us as we see temperatures in the 50s coming up. So I know that that's tricky for us. So I know we had talked about Roy, and I don't know if you had a chance to kind of check in, and maybe you too, about, we had talked about potentially piggybacking on any UVM type of survey that was going out so we wouldn't overwhelm farmers with things. I didn't know if you had any luck, Roy, of looking to see what might be coming out from UVM in the near future.
Sure. Yeah. So I did an email survey of extension folks who were planning to do their survey. That sounds weird. I know, but anyway, so I have 3 people in extension and UVM that are getting ready to do some kind of farmer survey. One is just about ready, and the second and third that I'll mention are kind of looking at later on down the year. So Margaret Skinner, who's our entomologist, is looking to put out a survey soon, and would like to kind of get some sense of what the survey questions from AIB would be like. As well, David Connor from CALS, from the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, is also looking at putting something together, but later on this year. And Mark Canella from our Ag Business Unit also is, they're contemplating doing a survey of farmers, specifically looking at farm viability issues, but certainly, you know, they felt like that there would be some synergy, including questions that would come from the AIB as well. So those are 3. There may be others. I did, as I said, send out a kind of wide email swath. So there may be others who will check in with me soon. But these folks are more or less, starting with Margaret Skinner, pretty much ready to move and to help.
Thank you, Roy. That's incredibly useful. Margaret, who is her intended audience? Do you know?
She was looking at covered agriculture groups. So people are doing greenhouses and that kind of thing. But it doesn't have to be restricted to that group if she sees value in creating synergy with questions about, you know, pesticide issues. As I said, she is she's an entomologist and is interested in the data anyways.
So members speak up, but I have the list of questions that we asked in last year's survey. If you want to look at that, if you want to pick questions from last year that you want to continue, that we could potentially work with either of these 3. It sounds like Margaret, we would need to get a move on, right? Because she's looking to use it to send it out sooner. but then the other two, David and Mark, maybe we have a little bit more time, so, go ahead, Roy.
Much more time. So they're looking at later on this year, and David even mentioned possibly 25, so early 25. So there's time for those two. But like I said, there may be other people who may contact me at any point, who have gotten a grant that requires a survey. So that might pop up just suddenly. This happens all the time in extension.
So let me pull up, taking a second. So I'm trying to pull up the questions that we had last year, and so things that you wanted to share. Keep or not. So the first couple are just around, who is completing the survey, so farm name, and then size of farm, location. This was something, so I think location county we do need to know, because that's a requirement in the statute that we have to have a survey that encompasses the 14 counties. So I think we do have to keep county at least. So other questions we included last year. Any of the following reasons persuade you to reduce pesticide use? With the list and things. We asked in the previous year, did you practice IPM? If so, what kind of practices did you do? What would encourage you to practice them? So in this coming year, what type of operation do you have, whether it's organic, non-organic, or you have both within your property? We asked a lot of questions about treated seed, we did this knowing that we were going to have the, discussion topics that we did for the majority of the year. More about treated seeds. So if you could purchase one without a neonic, would you? If I remember correctly, the answers to this were either don't know or don't use. We didn't get a lot of non-organic conventional farmers responding. Lots about custom seed, pesticide seed treatment. And then what types of pesticides do you use? And then we asked about ag plastic. This is a potential on our list of responsibilities in addition to pesticide. Ag plastic, Wendy Sue, I know, and the minute I saw your face, I know that you sent an article that I forgot to share with members, and I will do so when I share the minutes for this meeting. That was about microplastics. So I apologize. I'm sorry I didn't get that out. And so we did ask about what types of ag plastic do you use? How do you manage them? Basically, how do you reuse them, or do you recycle them, or do you dispose through a landfill? What would persuade you to change your current practices with ag plastic? Then we talked about soil tests, because we also have just other ag inputs in our responsibility. So whether synthetic fertilizer or natural fertilizer, we asked about. And what type of services do you use? And then if there's anything else you wanted to add. So I wonder if members had an idea if they wanted to keep certain questions, if there was a specific topic that they wanted to really ask about for this round, for this year, or if we wanted to jump on the opportunity to get in with Margaret's survey that's coming up. I'm happy to go if you guys have an idea of what questions you want to ask. Yeah, Wendy, do.
Would it be useful to have, ask a question, are you concerned about microplastics or are you concerned about PFAS in, the products you're using or in your soil or something like that? Would that be useful for us to ask that? That's all.
I don't know if I have an answer. Anyone else have thoughts of what, is it useful to ask that question? What would we do
with the info.
with the information?
I assume everybody's gonna say yes, but I don't know, yeah, what are we gonna do with that?
Sorry, yeah, Pam.
Can you ask them instead what they have concerns of? Like, and use it as a way to get feelers out for where people's concerns are?
Open-ended instead of click, then,
Yeah.
so then they can't just click all of them.
You
or
can still
whatever.
put in PFAS and microplastics, get people thinking, but to use it as kind of horizon scanning.
That might help focus us.
Yeah. Could help. But but what are your concerns? Question mark? Or what are your concerns about the inputs that you use, or environmental concerns? Like, I feel like there's a couple of ways we could qualify concerns.
It's a very broad question.
Yeah.
But it's so freeing. Maybe people will want to fill out the survey. They can put their paragraph thoughts in.
I do. My just personal thought is that I think we put a lot of effort into the survey in 23, and we didn't really learn a lot from it because of who answered it, I guess, really. Like, so we basically, the people who answered it didn't have high, like, pesticide input onto their farm and or treated seed input onto their farm. So the information we were trying to gather was just not there to gather from the participants who answered it. So I'm kind of liking that because I feel like it might focus us, whereas we didn't really get any focus from last year's survey.
Is the survey required by statute?
Yeah, so I think it can be interpreted that way. So it's listed in the list. So it says like, we have to do a annual report. And then it basically lists a survey to inform the annual report. So it doesn't say an annual survey, but it says to inform the report. So it can be assumed, I guess, that the survey should be new every year if you're writing a new report every year.
But I also wonder whether or not the survey, the work of the AIB, the work of the agency to get in front of various groups might influence not that more people might respond this upcoming year due to the outreach that has happened by the agency, participation on various farmer alliance groups, working with, anyway, just an idea. and I don't know the answer to that, but I'm hopeful, maybe. But we could just change the survey completely and just ask one question. Survey with one question.
And what county are you from?
And what county too? And what county you're from? And eliminate names. Like initially, we thought it would be nice to see if we asked the same survey. And this is what I was thinking, because I was participating in, putting the survey together, was if people's ideas changed over time. That's why we collected who was filling out the survey.
Yeah.
And so we could see change over time, or potentially see change over time if people completed it every year. But we've only done it for 1 year, so maybe we can just change tactic now. Or we could put the survey aside and return to it next year.
Yeah, we
You
do
know.
that a lot with our big survey questions, is we'll have questions on multi-year cycles, because it gets repetitive to ask the same questions every year in a row.
Yeah.
So we'll ask them every 3 to 5 years. And so some years we'll have shorter questions. And
That's a great idea.
we also
That's a great
pay like
idea.
$10,000 per question, so
Uh-huh.
you have to be very careful with them. But that idea can make sense, especially if you didn't get the responses that you wanted from the first year. I think it makes sense to sort of think about it more holistically. And what is the goal of the survey? Sorry, I was going to look up the AIB statutory language.
I know, I don't have it up right now.
I was only thinking, we worked on lead and maple syrup, and would this be a tool that we could use to ask questions about how widespread is what is the potential? Because I think there's not a lot of testing, which makes sense, and so it's an environmental issue that could be out there, and we might not know how broad it is, so we could use it.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think it's what is it? It's ag. Are you gonna look that?
Oh,
Okay, so it's not as general as environmental.
No,
concern
I think
of
it's like
any farm.
specific. I think
Okay.
it's agricultural input.
Yeah. And it's specific to the charge of the AIB, is my understanding. That's how we orchestrated the questions.
So hold on, we'll get that answer. Steve, go ahead.
I think we did this, but the survey went out to the Vermont dairy producers, right?
Yeah.
Alliance? Okay.
Yeah, I think we sent it to like the head, you know what I mean? Like the executive director or the administrator, to ask them to disseminate to their members. You know what I mean? So it didn't go to all members directly from us. It was to a single point of contact for them to disseminate, with Anson saying, please disseminate, we need your help, to that single point of contact. So yeah.
Yep. I just making the point that I think a lot of what we're talking about impacts that group of producers heavily, and however we can get them to weigh in is probably really important. Maybe there's a raffle if you enter. I don't know. I'm just thinking outside of the box.
Yeah, I agree. And I think even attending like the Bordeaux Brothers, which they're like any of their informational days that they have for their customers, that's the audience that's there, right? And, last year I remember attending and kind of probing about surveys, and all of them were like, unless you give me money, I'm not filling out a survey.
Oh.
So which is understandable. It's busy, it's hard. We're asking them to do something for free and for nothing in return. And I know that Steve Dwinell on our side has said, we can't offer any financial incentive. Raffle, I don't know if it's a different type of incentive. I don't know. I can take that as an action item to ask if what kosher is something, or an experience at a farm, or something like that could be offered, but I don't know. But I can certainly try and find out.
It's not I'm not on the board, but I kind of like the idea of like a 3 to 5 year cycle on the really long list of questions that we've already developed, and then maybe intervening shorter questions a shorter list of questions or a question, as was pitched earlier. And then also building in when we have our longer list of survey questions, and you bring up, going to Bordeaux Brothers, or if we go to an event, like if we go to Border View Farm for something, that we as agents of the agency actually approach people and fill the survey out with them in person at the event. Like, I actually think if we all did that as agents of the agency with our computers and approaching farmers, we actually might get more participation than we got when we just sent it out earlier. So like a different way of engaging.
You guys have a lot of people out in the field.
We have a lot of people out in the field. I mean, we have inspectors that do inspections, and we have, like at any point in time,
What kind of selection bias are you getting them?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's not something I'm
Maybe
thinking
some.
about. I'm just talking.
Yeah.
Like, that's not something I'm good at. So, but ultimately, it would be we could think about that, I guess, and maybe come up with an idea.
How do other members feel about the longer set, so that document that I just showed of questions on a 3 to 5 year cycle, and a shorter, potentially even, 2 questions: what county are you from? What environmental concerns do you have? Or kind of those alternate years? How do members respond to that proposal?
I'm okay with doing a longer set of questions and then a shorter set. I think that might be good.
So I'm going to say this, and I'm going to look at Steve while I'm saying it. Having lived vicariously as a farmer for a long time, I know that the rate of response, is proportionate to how long the survey is, how easy the questions are to answer, and how tired the farmer is. That means how many surveys they had received prior to this one. Those are some of the factors, not all of them. But as I was looking through the questions while you were showing them, I was kind of thinking, well, I mean, if you send these, for example, to the beekeepers associations, the response right now would be significant, would be tremendous. But so that's what I think. But in terms of dairy farmers and others or more large scale, I feel that when they're not tired, when they haven't received a dozen surveys prior, I mean, they're gonna be happy to send, or happier to send in responses if the questions are not exhaustive. Right, Steve, or wrong?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a way you can tie it into like something that is already required? I'm not very well versed on sort of all the water quality divisions regulations, but like, is an MFO an annual permit? I don't know, but something like, sneak it into something that is, it needs to be done, and then, it's there, and I don't know, just a thought. If you're already doing something that you have to do, it's like just a few more questions, and it look, I don't want to be deceptive, but yeah.
I think that could tie into maybe not every year, but
right,
3 to 5 years. Like, oh, like this is, we're on the 5th year, so your permit is going to have, we have to.
I mean, granted, that's only, a limited demographic, but
Some of the private
at least they would probably answer.
There's a lot of them for on-farm applications, might be. Yeah, then we have the C&T, people who take the private applicator exam. Yeah. We could.
Right.
Because they're a captive audience.
Yep.
Potentially sitting in a conference room taking an exam. Especially if you had one of those interactive surveys. Yeah, where you could record that. I don't know whether we have such a thing. But yeah, no, I'm not sure. Technology, that kind of technology, but
I think you can do poll questions. Anonymous poll questions.
yeah.
You could talk to Sarah.
Sarah, I was gonna say Sarah does
And that's
a lot.
coming up in April.
The core is in April, which would include private
Private,
applicators.
yeah.
Right.
And then, the 1A in March meeting.
I think there's some, right, it's a phone, stays in the veterinary conference.
Like if we had one
A
question.
phone app that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
So maybe that's two ways. So if we have these, you know, two questions, and please speak up front, but I'm thinking, okay, we have, what county are you from? So we can show that we've surveyed counties. And what are your environmental concerns
You'd have to have a list. that
your
they could-
farm?
Yeah, that they could.
Yeah,
make it
With
easy.
another option, so a list with another option that they could fill in?
I mean, if you want it
On
to
the
be
poll thing, you can't
interactive,
have another
right.
option.
I don't know if you can type in all that stuff.
What that put in is asking,
Yep, sorry.
understanding how agricultural inputs are used and current challenges they face in reducing them. So maybe it's the current challenges that they face in reducing them that we really want to hear, because then that gives us a push of which of those could be reduced.
So our question is what?
It sounds like two questions. Maybe. Like, what are the concerns about environmental impacts of the agricultural inputs you use, and what are your challenges to reduce those impacts? No.
Well, 'cause
And then the county.
Sarah, is that what you were trying to say?
I think so. I mean, are the farmers really connected to the long-term environmental impacts of their agricultural inputs? Or are they more concerned with the challenges in reducing those? I would think like the second part.
Maybe more so, yeah.
Because that's like a tangential thing that's hard for them to do, I think, in their,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just guessing. I know nothing about farming
Yeah.
practice.
Well, even just speaking to like the seed question, it allows them an opportunity to express what they see as a difficulty should the input of Unix go away. What's then their difficulty and how do they foresee it for them?
Okay, so 3 questions. So if I reach out to Margaret Roy, like, and with you, and ask if those are questions that she might be, that fit. I mean, I don't want them to be like way out in left field based on what she is already asking for.
Yeah, well, you could reach out to her. I mean, she asked me about what the questions were. I didn't provide anything to her. I told her I'd follow up, but you can certainly do that and see whether it's a fit for whatever she's doing.
Okay.
I will let her know that to expect you.
Okay, perfect. I know I've met her in a past life, years ago, but she probably will not remember me, so that's good to give her a heads up. Thanks, Roy. Okay, so I'll kind of propose those 3 questions, including the county, to see if they fit within her survey. And if they don't fit within her survey, then I think we can figure out another way to get them, whether it's through the when we're training on the core exam for private, and that would be also commercial applicators, but
Yeah.
private too would be encompassed in that. Or through another just email dissemination like we did before.
Could you do hard copy stuff at meeting? like a hard copy survey?
Sure, yeah.
Because there are, you know, for that initial cert, I think it's gonna be in 5 different locations, monitored by the agents. So
It
the
is.
agents were in charge of the
Yeah.
Surveys.
Yeah, when they distribute the exams, it'd be like private applicator, okay,
Right.
and then we could just give them the paper copy of it, and then we could still create it in an electronic format. We would
right.
just data enter it ourselves.
Right.
We can divide and conquer. You get some, I get some.
So our options are include with, yeah, Skinner's. Hard copies when core,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or talk to Sarah and see what her capabilities are. Because she does, like, she has to get, for research stuff, she makes sure that she gets everybody's, she can talk to everybody and get their license number or see their face. So she may have a way to send out a poll to everybody. I just don't know.
What do you want to be on our, like, if you want to have some list for environmental impacts? So microplastics, I know I've heard, do you want to say PFAS? What are there some environmental impact
You
pollinators?
could still talk about pollinators
Yep.
and neonics or insecticides broadly.
Or the rodenticides, you know, do you use
Yep,
or is that
rodenticide,
an issue on your farm?
like non-target rodenticide exposure?
Sure.
Did we mention old silage tires?
Oh,
Oh, tires.
tires, yep.
The recommendation for a lot of us young farmers taking over farms with piles of those from our neighbors is generally to bury them in the ground because there's no, way to get rid of them. That's what my neighboring farms have been telling me to do with our old ones. I think upstate New York has a really great water quality program for getting rid of those. To clarify, we would never bury our tires, but that is we were given by the older farmers in town.
Yeah.
So do they have PFAS? Is that the issue with old tires? 6 ppd.
That's a new one.
Yep.
Do you want me to add that to the list?
It is very toxic to fish, and it's been coming off of tires and into streams for 60 years. I thought you were just supposed to throw those tires off your truck and on those back roads. No,
And they all wash up in Waterbury
Yeah.
when it floods, so. It's a good way of
That
collecting.
has also been suggested to me.
We have a tire slicer program. I mean, since we're recording this
Yeah,
event,
so
where we, the agency has a tire slicer, and we've had days, advertised days that individuals can bring in their old tires, in which we'll slice off the sidewalls, which can still be used. We keep the sidewalls, which can still be used to cover a silage bunk. But it doesn't retain the water, I guess is the point. So that it's not a mosquito breeding habitat. So it doesn't get rid of the issues with the chemical, but you can still have useful sidewalls to put on your silage bunks. And then the treads get donated to a energy generation facility in another state. Downwind, right? Downwind. I'm not commenting on any of that, but the tires get used in accordance with laws that protect the environment, apparently. I don't know the details of the energy generation facility. So there are opportunities, I guess, to manage tires, to not be mosquito breeding grounds specifically.
Okay, so how about options for so we're gonna ask about environmental impact, concerns of environmental impact, so we have some list of those. What am I talking about? What are your challenges? What challenges do you face in reducing inputs?
Environmental, no. Impacts on the environment from your use of inputs.
Yeah, to reduce those impacts. So what are some choices for that? So what challenges to do? So cost.
Availability. Yeah.
Of alternatives.
Alternatives. Yeah. And we don't have to be specific. It can just be that broad, right?
Yeah.
Or the quality of the alternative.
Or knowledge of
Or knowledge.
alternatives.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. There's some, in the chat, there's some news about tire chipper as well.
I don't know if
Okay.
Gates is still open, but I have heard that as well.
Okay. Great. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. I think we have some good, kind of next steps to work off of. So I'll contact Margaret, and we will also contact Sarah Kingsley Richards at UVM to learn about some of our different options for disseminating our 3-question survey. And we will save our longer survey for a couple years down the road to get that continual feedback. Which is great. Thanks for that discussion, and thank you, Roy, for reaching out to everyone in Extension. That's very helpful. Okay, so unless members have anything else to bring up, ask about, questions, I'll open it up for public comment. Okay, are there any members of the public that are joining us today would like to provide comment? Go ahead, Marguerite. Thanks for being patient. Oh, can you not unmute? Maybe because I muted.
I think I did unmute. I don't know.
Yep, we can hear you. Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, I just wanted the members of the committee to encourage you to listen to Kyla Bennett's testimony before the Senate Agriculture and the Senate Health and Welfare Committee on PFAS in pesticides. She will provide a great deal of information as a national expert on the issue. But I can tell you as the coordinator of the PFAS coalition here in the state of Vermont, that the studies that we've looked at have found 55 PFAS chemicals in over 1,400 pesticides. And none of those 1,400 pesticides that contain those 55 PFAS are among the PFAS that were removed by the EPA. So PFAS are used as active ingredients in pesticides because they have special qualities that either extend the shelf life or keep them effective and stable or provide an even coating. Unfortunately, they are still toxic. And as I wrote, with 15,000 forms of PFAS, and I know that there's some dispute over the definition, uh, that of those 15,000 forms, we've only really tested a handful for toxicity, but we all know that they contain that really strong chemical bond, and that bond is very difficult to break down and has huge environmental and human health impacts. So yeah, it's true that the containers have been found to cause some of the PFAS contamination, but even a recent study done by Portuguese scientists in 2022 found that between 2015 and 2020, almost 70% of the pesticides introduced by manufacturers use PFAS in their chemical formulation. We as the public don't know what's in those, and we can't find out because they're not listed, especially if they're inert ingredients or business confidential. And we also know that a lot of our produce and a lot of our food is now on the shelves in supermarkets, is now showing PFAS as a contaminant coming from either the pesticides or the biosludge used on the soil. My argument would be, and I just hope that the Agricultural Innovation Committee would realize that double the poisons in this case is not good. And while the piece of legislation, Senate Bill 197, in my opinion, could be strengthened, I still think we need to say that there should be no PFAS in pesticides. I just want to make that point. I am in this area because I care about my grandchildren and future generations. I want them to be able to eat blueberries and fruit and collard greens and kale and all the things that we're able to eat. And one of my saddest experiences lately was speaking at Farm to Plate. And what happened at Farm to Plate was interesting. Beforehand, I had printed some information on our website about where farmers, organic and non-organic farmers, could get their soil tested for free. And I had someone from the organic movement write me back saying, whoa, we don't want to do that. I mean, if we find out that there's PFAS in our produce or in our products, we'll get shut down and go out of business. So even, it's easier to stay ignorant and ignore the problem than it is to actually do what we need to do, which is ban these products now and look at the alternatives. And there are alternatives. I suggest that you become familiar with ChemSec and some of the European Union organizations that are coming up with alternatives to PFAS for many things, including semiconductors. So that's all I wanted to say. A good question for your farmers would be, if you could test your crops or your soil for PFAS, would you? Because I think that's where you'll get the shocking answer. So thank you for letting me at least say that. We've been working for over 5 years on this issue, and it's certainly one that I'm very passionate about.
Thank you, Marguerite.
And who did she say, whose testimony?
Kyla Bennett.
Kyla Bennett. Okay.
Yeah, she's referencing Kyla Bennett's
Okay.
testimony to the committee, Senate Committee for Health and Welfare.
Okay.
And also the Agricultural Committee. She testified before both more than once. She's with the Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility.
Thank you, Marguerite. Sylvia, would you like to share a comment? You can introduce yourself as well.
Okay, all right. I'm not sure how to get my picture up, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Marguerite, for your comments. I back you on that, on those comments. I wanted to put in a request. I wanted to ask somebody on your committee, maybe it would be Morgan Griffiths, to send me Zach Zukowski's chart, please, on the H706 comparison with the New York bill. Could you
Yep,
do?
Sylvia, yep, we'll put it, I can send it to you, but it'll be posted on the Ag Innovation Board website as a meeting material for today's meeting. And I'll send you that link when it's up later this week.
All right, thank you. So I would like to speak to the SGARs. I did a little research this morning and found that Audubon has comments on their website opposed to the use. I would like to ask the department actually to not register these products in Vermont. The SGARs, I don't know. This seems, they're highly toxic. They cause death by only one dose, and they're dangerous to our raptors because the pesticide remains in the animal. The dead animal can for over 100 days. So this seems like another way to kill off our raptors, which have somehow recovered from our DDT days. I'm not sure why. This seems like the nuclear option. Just really. Let's consider not registering these SGARs. I don't know if the door is already, if the horse is already out of the barn or not, but that this is a product that looks really dangerous to our wildlife. I mean, it could be dangerous to your barn cat, and so please consider, I mean, we don't have to register everything in our state that EPA says is okay. I have seen testimony from former EPA workers saying that EPA has never really said no to a pesticide that came through their doors. We need to use some judgment here. That would be my comment. So I'm opposed to go on Audubon Vermont's website and see their comments. 303 dead eagles in 4 years. They all had the 2 or 3 most common SGARs in their bodies, in their livers. This is not what Vermont needs to do. We need to reduce pesticides. We need to reduce the dangers to our earth community. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Marguerite, I see that your hand's still up. Do you want to add another comment or?
No, I forgot to take it down, sorry.
Okay, no, that's okay. I just wanted to give you the opportunity. Does anybody else like to provide public comment today for the record? All right, thank you for all of you who participated today. Thank you to members for dialing in and or coming in person. Our next meeting is March 25th. But in the meantime, so I'll probably we'll be able to share an update about BMPs in the next week or so, and then just look for minutes from today and meeting materials that get posted online and on our SharePoint/Teams site. So thank you all, and enjoy sun if you have a little bit outside. We do have a little bit here in Williston, but so thank you very much.